Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. We're going to be exploring Thinking in Systems today by Donella Meadows.
A really fantastic book and an invitation, I think, for all of us to kind of move beyond that linear way of thinking.
It really is. And Meadows argues that systems thinking, this lens that we can put on, can transform how we approach problems, how we make decisions.
And ultimately, how we create a more sustainable and fulfilling future.
Exactly.
Yep.
So are you ready to kind of embark on this journey?
Oh, absolutely. Let's dive in and unpack these core concepts and see how we can use them.
So Meadows starts by defining what a system is.
Right, it's not just a bunch of stuff.
Right.
It's elements that are interconnected elements that are organized to achieve a purpose.
And she uses all these really relatable examples: trees, the human body.
I love how she makes it so accessible with these examples.
Me too. And she emphasizes that these three components, these elements, the interconnections, and the function of the system are key to understanding any system.
And they're all so critical, right? You take away one of those pieces and it really changes things.
Absolutely.
Think about a tree, right? The roots, the trunk, the branches, leaves, those are the elements. The flow of nutrients, the water between them, that's the interconnections. And the tree's purpose is to grow and thrive.
Right.
That's its function.
And she really brilliantly demonstrates how changing any one of these can drastically alter a system's identity.
Oh yeah, you change out those oak leaves for maple leaves, it's still a tree, but the interconnections are different, right? Or if you disrupt the flow of nutrients from the roots, that could really impact its survival.
Oh, for sure.
And then even more dramatically, if you change the function, say you decide, well, I just want to use this tree for lumber,
Right.
Not for its natural role, that has huge consequences for the entire ecosystem.
Yeah, and so we see that even a seemingly simple system like a tree has all these hidden complexities. And Meadows introduces these other ideas, these concepts of stocks and flows.
Which are just so crucial for understanding how systems behave over time.
And she uses the bathtub analogy.
Oh, it's so good.
So good.
I mean, who doesn't love a good bathtub analogy?
Right, so the bathtub is the stock.
Yeah, the amount of water it holds at any given moment.
Right. And the faucet filling it up,
That's your inflow,
inflow in the drain,
your outflow.
outflow, exactly, and changing these flows, so cranking up the faucet or plugging the drain,
Yeah.
impacts the water level over time.
Exactly. It's so simple, but it's so powerful because it applies to so many things.
It really does. And, we can apply this to, real world situations, business inventory or water resource usage.
Absolutely. All comes down to the interplay of these stocks and flows.
Right. And how delays in accumulation and the flow of information influences everything.
It's wild how it applies to not just tangible things like water, but intangible things too, like information or knowledge or even
Emotions.
emotions. Exactly. Your emotional state can be thought of as a stock,
Right.
constantly being influenced by inflows of positive and negative experiences.
And outflow through, maybe our coping mechanisms.
Exactly.
So then Meadows throws another really important piece into the mix: feedback loops.
The unsung heroes and villains of the systems world.
Right.
And there's two main types, balancing and reinforcing.
So those balancing loops strive for equilibrium.
Think of a thermostat.
The room gets too cold.
It kicks on the heating system.
Too hot, the AC comes on.
Exactly. It's constantly measuring and adjusting to try to keep that stable temperature.
And then she introduces this idea of shifting dominance.
Oh, yeah, where one loop can temporarily overpower another.
Which leads to really interesting dynamics.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like on a really, really cold day,
Right.
a poorly insulated house might struggle to keep up.
Right.
Even though the heater's working its tail off, the cooling feedback loop is dominating in essence because the outflow of heat exceeds that inflow from the heating system.
Exactly.
And then you have the reinforcing loops,
Which amplify a particular trend.
like compound interest.
The more money you have,
The more interest you earn.
the more money you have, and so on and so on.
But they can also work in the opposite direction.
Like a dead spiral.
Exactly. It's a runaway train in a negative direction.
Right. And Meadows emphasizes that these feedback loops, both balancing and reinforcing, are constantly at work shaping the behavior of systems in these subtle and often surprising ways.
Yeah, they can create stability, they can drive growth, or they can trigger collapse. It all depends on their nature and how they interact.
And this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Meadows dives deeper into, why systems can be so remarkably effective. Why sometimes they throw these curveballs at us.
And those common pitfalls that systems and, us as participants in the systems often fall into.
Right. And that's what we'll be exploring further in this deep dive.
How to apply this way of thinking, this systems thinking, to understand the complexities of the world and maybe even more importantly, to make better decisions within it.
And that's where thinking in systems really shines.
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding the theory, it's about translating these concepts into practical actions.
That can help us navigate the challenges and the opportunities that systems present.
Exactly.
Ready to uncover the magic of well-designed systems.
Let's do it.
Well-designed systems, they have these amazing properties like resilient self-organization hierarchy.
It's like they almost have a mind of their own.
In a way, they do.
So let's start with resilience.
Okay.
What does that even mean in the context of systems?
Well, imagine a forest recovering from a wildfire.
Okay.
It doesn't just go back to exactly how it was before.
Right.
It adapts. It might even become stronger.
Interesting.
And this resilience, it comes from having all these feedback loops operating at different scales,
Okay.
providing redundancy, so if one mechanism fails, another one can kick in.
So it's like having backup systems in place.
Exactly. You're prepared for disruptions
Right.
at multiple levels. In Meadows, she contrasts this with systems that are designed for efficiency, but they lack that resilience.
Like what?
Think about those just-in-time delivery models.
Oh.
They're super efficient when everything's running smoothly,
Right.
but as soon as there's a disruption to the supply chain,
It all falls apart.
exactly, they're vulnerable to the slightest hiccup.
Whereas resilience is about distributing risk, having multiple pathways options available.
Precisely.
So then there's self-organization, which is even more mind-blowing to me.
It is pretty incredible.
The idea that systems can actually evolve.
Create new structures, new behaviors over time.
It makes me think of evolution, how species adapt to their environment.
Right, they develop traits that help them survive.
Exactly. And it's not just biological systems.
No, not at all. Think about technological advancements, the way languages evolve, societal shifts.
That's all self-organization.
It is. These are all examples of systems constantly adapting and changing.
It's amazing to think how much of what we observe is actually a result of this self-organization.
It really is. And then we have hierarchy, which Meadows describes as systems organizing themselves into layers.
They're like levels within levels.
Exactly. And she uses this great fable to illustrate this.
Oh, tell me about it.
It's the story of Hora and Tempest, these two watchmakers.
Okay.
And it shows how breaking down a complex task into smaller, interconnected modules can lead to both efficiency and resilience.
So how does the story go?
Well, Hora, he uses this hierarchical approach.
Okay.
He can handle interruptions without his entire operation falling apart.
Got it.
Whereas Tempest, he assembles his watches in a linear fashion.
So any disruption throws everything off.
Exactly. And the point is that the higher levels in the hierarchy,
Right.
they're there to guide and support the lower levels, not control them.
Interesting.
It's a delicate balance, but it's crucial for the system to function smoothly.
So this watchmaker fatal, it's a powerful analogy for how both natural and man-made systems.
Can benefit from this hierarchical organization.
It's all about finding that balance between control and support.
Exactly. But Meadows doesn't shy away from the fact that systems can also behave in ways that we don't expect.
Right, she dedicates a whole section to system surprises.
Because systems often defy our linear cause and effect thinking.
We tend to analyze events in isolation.
But to really understand a system,
We need to look beyond the individual events.
see the bigger picture, the underlying structure driving its behavior.
It's like seeing the forest for the trees. Or even better, seeing the whole ecosystem that the forest is a part of.
Right, and she outlines several sources of these system surprises.
Like what?
Well, first, there are non-linearities,
Okay.
where relationships within a system don't always follow a straight path.
So they can change abruptly.
Exactly, leading to unexpected outcomes.
Give me an example.
She uses the spruce budworm population in North American forests.
Okay.
Their numbers might be kept in check by predators for years,
Right.
and then suddenly, boom, an explosion.
And it devastates the forest.
Exactly, and then it collapses again.
So these non-linearities, they're not just some quirky insect phenomenon.
You know, they're everywhere.
Okay.
They affect ecological systems,
Mhm.
economic markets, all sorts of things.
Got it. So what else contributes to these system surprises?
Well, there's the issue of boundaries. We
Okay.
often impose artificial boundaries around systems,
Right.
but in reality, everything is connected.
So ignoring those connections can lead to unintended consequences.
Exactly. She gives the example of trying to relieve traffic congestion by building more highways,
Right.
only to find that it attracts more development.
Which just makes the problem worse.
Precisely. It's a classic case of addressing a problem within too narrow a scope.
Without considering the larger system.
Right, and that can really backfire.
So what other surprises are lurking in the world of systems?
Well, another source is the limiting factor.
Okay.
Meadows emphasizes that at any given time, there's often a single factor that's constraining a system's output.
regardless of other inputs.
Exactly. She uses Liebig's law of the minimum to illustrate this. It's
Yeah.
like picturing a barrel with staves of different lengths.
Okay.
The shortest stave determines how much water the barrel can hold.
So it's about identifying and addressing those limiting factors.
Right, whether it's a shortage of essential nutrients for crops or limited access to education for a population.
It's about finding that weakest link.
Exactly. And then we can't forget about delays.
Right, systems don't always respond instantaneously.
No, they don't. These delays within feedback loops.
Can create oscillations and unintended consequences.
For sure, think about delays in building power plants.
Okay.
It can lead to cycles of overcapacity and undercapacity in the electricity grid.
So those delays can have a ripple effect throughout the system.
Precisely. They can be really significant. And then finally, Meadows introduces the concept of bounded rationality.
Makes sense.
It's the recognition that humans, even with the best intentions,
We don't always make perfect decisions.
right, because we don't have perfect information.
So our decisions are bounded by the knowledge we have,
Exactly. And this can lead to suboptimal outcomes.
especially when dealing with complex systems.
Absolutely. She uses the example of fishermen who lack complete data on fish stocks.
So they end up overfishing.
Right, depleting the very resource they depend on.
It's a reminder that even well-intentioned actions can have negative consequences.
If they're based on limited knowledge or a narrow perspective.
So we've got all these potential pitfalls, but what can we do about them?
Well, that leads us to another crucial aspect of Meadows' work,
Which is,
the concept of system traps.
okay,
These are common patterns of behavior that often lead to recurring problems.
she calls them archetypes.
Right, and they're really interesting because they expose the dangers of short-term thinking.
And how seemingly logical solutions can actually make things worse.
Exactly. A prime example is the fixes that fail archetype.
Tell me more about that.
Well, she illustrates it with agricultural policies that are meant to reduce surplus production.
But they end up creating even more surplus.
Exactly. It's this vicious cycle where the short-term fix
Creates unintended consequences that require further intervention.
and ultimately just amplify the original problem.
It's like digging yourself deeper into a hole,
Precisely. And then there's the classic tragedy of the commons.
where individuals acting in their own self-interest.
Deplete a shared resource.
Right. She uses Hardin's pasture example,
Where each herdsman adds another cow to the communal grazing land.
thinking it's just one more cow, what difference does it make?
But collectively, they overgraze the pasture and ruin it for everyone.
It's a powerful illustration of how individual actions can have a huge collective impact.
Exactly. And without some form of collective management.
Those shared resources can be tragically squandered.
It's a cautionary tale, for sure. And Meadows goes on to discuss other archetypes.
Each one highlighting these recurring patterns of behavior that lead to undesirable outcomes.
Like eroding goals, where standards gradually decline.
Right, or escalation where competition leads to an arms race.
And success to the successful, where initial advantages compound, leading to greater inequality.
So we've identified these traps, but the question is, what can we do about them?
That's where Meadows introduces this powerful concept of leverage points.
Leverage points.
Yes, these are places within a system where a small change.
Can have a big impact.
Exactly, but she cautions us that our intuition about these leverage points is often wrong.
So we need to be careful.
Yes. She talks about Forrester's work with the world model, which revealed this counterintuitive idea that slowing growth could be more effective in addressing global problems than accelerating it.
It challenges our assumptions about progress.
It does, and it encourages us to look for unexpected points of influence.
So what are some of these leverage points?
Well, she presents 12 of them ranked by effectiveness,
Okay.
starting with the least effective, which are those numbers.
Like constants and parameters.
Exactly, things like taxes and subsidies.
Which get a lot of attention, but often have limited impact.
Right. Meadows argues that while tweaking those numbers might provide some temporary relief,
They rarely address the underlying structure of the system
it's like adjusting the water pressure in a leaky pipe.
without fixing the leak itself.
Exactly, and she moves on to talk about buffer sizes, the physical structure of the system, the length of delays.
All these things that influence how a system behaves,
Right, and she even touches on the power of self-organization,
which we talked about earlier.
highlighting its role in creating resilience and fostering innovation.
But she suggests that there are even more powerful leverage points.
And this is where we get into the realm of goals, paradigms, and even transcending paradigms.
Those are some pretty big concepts. Could you elaborate a bit?
Well, Meadows argues that the goals of a system are incredibly important.
Okay.
If the goal is misaligned with our values, The system will produce the wrong outcomes no matter how efficient it is.
It's like the saying, be careful what you wish for.
Exactly. You might get what you asked for, but it might not be what you really wanted.
And then there are paradigms.
Those deeply held beliefs about how the world works,
Right.
and they shape how we design and interact with systems,
So shifting those paradigms,
can unlock transformative change.
but paradigm shifts are hard, aren't they?
They require questioning those fundamental assumptions that we often don't even realize we're making.
It's about seeing the world in a new way.
Exactly. And Meadows suggests that the most powerful leverage point of all,
Is transcending paradigms?
yes, questioning our deepest assumptions and embracing new ways of seeing the world.
It's about recognizing that even our most cherished beliefs might be holding us back.
From creating a better future.
So Meadows' work, it's not just about pointing out the problems.
No, it's about giving us tools to understand them and to think about solutions.
She concludes by outlining some practical steps for applying systems thinking in our daily lives.
Right, things like being mindful of our language, honoring and distributing information, embracing complexity and uncertainty,
Even encouraging us to defy the disciplines.
thinking across boundaries and integrating insights from different perspectives,
And above all,
expanding our circle of care to encompass the well-being of the entire system.
not just our own immediate interests.
Exactly.
This deep dive into thinking in systems has been incredibly enriching.
It has.
Meadows' work reminds us that we're all part of these intricate webs of interconnection.
And understanding systems is crucial for creating a more sustainable and fulfilling future.
It's not just about managing or controlling systems.
It's about participating in them wisely and compassionately.
Recognizing that our actions have ripple effects and striving to make those ripples positive ones.
Beautifully said.
Okay, so let's try and distill all these brilliant, sometimes mind-bending insights from Donella Meadows into 10 actionable points.
Like key takeaways, sort of a cheat sheet.
Yeah, exactly. A cheat sheet for systems thinking.
All right, I think we can do that. I
Yeah.
think we can capture the essence of her work. Those practical principles that you can actually use in your own life, in the systems you encounter every day.
Okay, so number one,
Right.
a system is more than just a random collection of things. It's a set of interconnected elements that are working towards a common goal.
Right, and understanding those interconnections, that's key to understanding how a system functions, how it behaves.
Number two, stocks and flows are super important,
Oh yeah, that bathtub analogy.
right? Recognize that every system involves accumulations of those stocks and the rate at which they change those inflows and outflows.
Whether you're managing your finances, your resources, even your time, this stock and flow perspective can be really helpful.
Number three, embrace the power and the potential pitfalls of feedback loops.
Balancing loops, they strive for equilibrium. Reinforcing loops can create exponential growth or decline.
Meadows encourages us to actually diagram the feedback loops in any system we're trying to understand.
Yeah, it helps you see how the system might respond to changes.
Number four, systems can surprise us. They don't always behave in those linear, predictable ways.
And Meadows points out all those sources of unpredictability, nonlinearities, boundaries, limiting factors, delays our own bounded rationality.
It's a call to be humble, to acknowledge that we don't have all the answers, and to be prepared for the unexpected.
Right.
Number five, be wary of system traps.
Those recurring patterns of behavior, those archetypes that can lead to persistent problems.
If you can recognize these traps, like fixes that fail or the tragedy of the commons, you can avoid falling into them.
Think long-term solutions address the root causes. Don't just rely on those superficial fixes.
Number six, seek leverage points.
Those places where a small change can make a big difference.
But our intuitions about these points are often wrong,
Yeah.
so we need to be open to challenging our assumptions.
Meadows gives us 12 leverage points ranked in order of effectiveness.
It's a framework for figuring out where our efforts might be most impactful.
Exactly.
Number seven, goals matter. If a system's goal is misaligned with our values, the system is just going to produce the wrong outcomes.
It's about being intentional, making sure our systems are serving a purpose that's aligned with what we really care about.
Efficiency isn't everything.
Right, you can have a system that's really efficient at achieving the wrong goal, and that's not a win.
Number eight, paradigms shape our reality.
Those deeply held beliefs about how the world works.
They influence how we design and interact with systems.
Meadows suggests that transforming those paradigms can unlock really profound change.
It's about being willing to question those fundamental assumptions that we often take for granted.
Seeing the world through different lenses.
Number nine, systems thinking is a practice, not a destination.
It's a journey.
We're always learning, adapting, refining our understanding.
And Meadows gives us all these practical actions we can take to cultivate a systems mindset.
From honoring information to expanding our circle of care.
It's about becoming more conscious, more skillful, more effective participants in the systems that surround us.
And finally, number 10,
All right.
embrace complexity. Systems are complex. They're interconnected, and that complexity can feel overwhelming.
It can.
But Meadows encourages us to celebrate that complexity,
Mm.
to see it as a source of resilience, creativity, and possibility.
Letting go of that reductionist mindset.
Right, instead embracing the richness and the interconnectedness of the world.
Well said.
This deep dive into thinking in systems has been such a rewarding journey.
I agree.
Meadows' work reminds us that we're all part of these intricate webs of connection.
And that understanding systems is essential for creating a more sustainable and fulfilling future.
It's not about trying to control systems.
It's about participating in them wisely and compassionately.
Recognizing that our actions have ripple effects and striving to make those ripples positive.
So well put.
Meadows leaves us with a thought-provoking question.
Oh, what's that?
Now that you have a taste of systems thinking, what system in your own life do you want to understand better?
That's a great question. It's an invitation to keep exploring, to apply these ideas to our own lives, to our communities, to the world around us.
Exactly, and I think that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into thinking in systems.
It's been a pleasure.